All right, guys, I am bringing back Todd Andrew to the channel. Now, if you guys have been a subscriber for many years, you are OG subscribers. He's a familiar face, but for many of you that have maybe joined our community or subscribed to my channel more recently, you probably don't recognize him. Now, what's special about Todd is not just his credits and his amazing placements he's had in his career, but what's really cool about Todd is that he and I basically started around the same time under the same production music library. We actually worked for the same company, and we were both sort of cutting our teeth at the same time, getting into the trenches at the same time. And both of us definitely struggled with self doubt and not sure if this thing was really going to work out because, boy, we were excited about it, but the results were very slow, and it took a long, 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 long time before royalties started trickling in slowly, before we started seeing placements. And that's what I love about Todd's story and our journey together is that we eventually branched off and kind of went in different directions, but we're still sticking with this and still enjoying and loving our journey in sync licensing. So there's a lot of wisdom you guys are going to get out of this interview. But not only that, I'm excited to announce Todd will be joining us as a reviewer on our Pro Feedback platform. So if you want to get wisdom and insights and feedback on your music from somebody who's been at this just as long as I have and has gotten amazing credits, which we'll share with you guys in a minute, you guys want to consider joining us in Pro Feedback. And if you're already a member, go check out Todd because he's now one of your available options to get feedback from. So Todd, welcome back to the channel, man. So good to see you, buddy.
Yeah.
Let's start at the very beginning for those that didn't get our first, didn't catch that first interview. Let's talk about those early years. Was it '07, '08 that you got started? And tell me about like where you were at in your music career and why sync was something that was interesting for you.
Yeah, I think I first heard about it in like '04. And I at that point was just going the traditional route, living in Los Angeles, playing bands, making hip hop beats, just trying to, of course, being very unsuccessful at that, working minimum wage day jobs. And I was introduced through a mutual friend to Christian, and he literally that day pulled out a BMI check. And at that point, it was like $9,000. He's like, I get these every 3 months. And I was like, sure, how to do this. And at that point, of course, initially I made about 7 tracks, and then I sort of fizzled out until about 2007, 2008. Because a lot of people sometimes will see that, oh, I want that result. And then you start doing it and you realize, oh, okay, this is actually work, and it's not so cut and dried. But then right around 2007, I said, okay, I'm ready to do this and take it seriously. And so I started working for him, and you did too, around the same time. And yeah, I started making tracks
It's awesome.
like that.
Now, I think I forgot about that first part of your career that you had jumped in, didn't see immediate results, jumped back out, which is the most common story in our business.
Yeah, yeah. You like dip your toe in the pool and you don't get immediate results, and you're like, no, this ain't working. But it's like, and he said 6 tracks is not going to cut it. I see people all the time, even now. This I met a singer the other day. They're like, oh yeah, I'm getting into sync licensing. I did like a CD and I put it out there, and I'm like, okay, it was like a CD. I was like, okay, yeah, it's gonna take a little more. I was like, talk to me when you've done 500 tracks. Like,
So
so
funny. So
that's a
true.
lot.
Yeah. And I find that common thread through most producers that are struggling to go, Jesse, I put out 5 tracks, 10 tracks, even 20 tracks. And it's been 2 years and no placements. And I'm like, well, what have you been doing in 2 years? Like, you didn't just drop off 20 tracks at a library and just expect them to do everything, right?
Right.
True.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's one thing that's right around 2007. I guess I was mainly a little more at my wit's end as far as how do you make money with music at that point. And right then there was the traditional route of getting signed was no longer an option. And I didn't even know if I wanted to do that. And I like the idea of sitting in my house, my own house, making music and not having to play by the music industry rules of, you know, being famous or having a fan base, things like that. I just want to make music, and so yeah, Christian said you can do it. I've done it. You can do it too, but here's how you do it, and you have to make track after track after track, and it's a numbers game. It is quality matters, but quantity matters too, and you can't get too caught up in any one particular track. And a lot of people, I think that's what I did too. But being a perfectionist also, like, oh my God, this is going to go on television. This has got to be perfect. Um, when I finally kind of caught my stride. I moved out of Los Angeles into a small town, Paso Robles, and I kind of got into a different situation where I was able to focus finally. And I think in like 2010 and 11, I made like 100 tracks a year. So I got it like every 3 days, I was kind of finishing a track. And so just getting in the groove of just get it done and out the door. We're not making masterpieces here. And that's what really, but even then, at that point, I still wasn't seeing the results because it takes a long time for it to filter through the system to get it on the library, have a music supervisor see it, put it in the show, have the show come out, wait 9 months for BMI to cut the check. It's like a 2 year process, you know? And so it's like, just be patient.
Be patient and keep showing up. So let's jump forward now. It's been many years. Can you maybe name off some of the more notable placements, theme placements, bigger placements that people probably would have maybe even heard or listened to themselves?
Yeah, from working with this company, it was Blaze Out Music, and then Current Music is kind of the parent company of them. Through them, I've gotten a lot of custom gigs, so a lot of that is themes. One of the first theme I got was for a defunct. It was a NBC put out a almost like a Netflix for workout videos called Radius, and I remember that was the first big. And he told me if whoever gets this gig is going to get $15,000. And for me, I was like, dude, that would change my life. And so I just decided I'm getting this gig. And they showed they had like a reference track. And so I just buckled down and did it. Somehow I landed it. That platform folded within 6 months. And so it was very short-lived, but I got a taste of, oh crap, I can do this. So we got the first major one after that was a TV show on Disney called The Mighty Med. It's about a bunch of kids who run a hospital for superheroes. And it was the kind of typical thing where within the company, there's maybe 10 composers. They do a brief. This is the style that they want. Everybody submits their demos by Friday. So it's usually we have like 5 days to put together demos. So um, I just, I guess I just had the right combination of that. And I landed the theme for The Mighty Men. And that was pretty amazing. Since then, on Fox Sports, there's a morning show called First Things First, which is like a 3 hour recap show that is still on the air to this day. And so every time they cut to commercial, the opening credits, this and that theme gets ran, and I get paid every time. There's an afternoon show called Lock It In. I think that one is now canceled. And in the break clock, there's one called Inside PBC Tonight. So within a day, I had 3 songs on Fox Sports. So by the time 4 o'clock rolled around, I've made like $200. It was pretty insane. It's not the case now. One of the biggest placements financially has been one called the Honda Sports Desk Update on NBC, which is the most nondescript title for a track. But basically, it's whenever they do sports shows and they cut to commercial and they say, "This is the Honda Sports Desk Update. This is what happened in sports this week." I did the theme. That landed that in 2015, and to this day, I have to have a separate BMI account just for that. And that is definitely the most major financially one because it gets ran all the time. And 3 years ago, I did 3 theme songs for the Olympics, the NBC Olympics broadcast. There was one called, because that was when they were in Japan. And so there was one called Tokyo Gold, which is like, this is what's happening in the Olympics. And I, at that time, did not have television, which is ironic. I do all this. I don't even watch TV. But my mom was watching the Olympics and she's like, "What's the track that you play?" I'm like, "Oh," I sent it to her. I'm like this. And she texts back, "They've been playing that all day." I was like, "Oh." So that was pretty amazing to have that as well. So
Totally, man. Well, obviously that's great. I mean, talk about heavy hitting where you have to create a whole new BMI account for one track placement. That's amazing, man.
yeah,
Great
yeah,
problem to have for sure. So
exactly.
that's obviously the promise of the industry. And I know that some people can even hear about all those amazing successes and go, well, if I hadn't gotten started back when, Trevor or when Todd or Jesse got started, then of course maybe I would have had those opportunities. Or he just got lucky. I hear this, not all the time, but I do hear it. But I do want to talk about like how these opportunities landed in your lap because you weren't just walking down the street doing something completely unrelated to sync and somebody threw an opportunity to hit you in the head. You show up every day, like every single day. You have this pretty interesting, consistent schedule where let's just talk about that because we briefly talked about it in our last interview. So what does your day look like when you wake up? What are you doing with your work? How are you balancing family, health, work, all that good stuff? What's your approach to this?
Yeah, and it is definitely difficult, especially for people that do have families. You got to show up. So I found the solution. It's there's a book I read called The War of Arts, which I'm sure a lot of people have read. It's amazing. And the proponent, I know it's a lot of writers, they just show up in the morning. And it seems like the morning is kind of the magic thing because the day gets away from you at a certain point. By noon, like someone's going to call, they have a flat tire, this and that. And if it's the evening and I haven't gotten any music done, I'm just not myself. I'm not able to like show up and people are like, hey, come play with board games with us. I'm like, so I try to hit the ground running as soon as I can. Before I used to have this routine of like, oh, I do meditation or I go for a walk and this and that. I think it's best to just get right to music. Pour a cup of coffee, fire up the computer, do it. And it doesn't have to be an insane amount of like you hear like Hans Zimmer is doing like 11-hour days and things like that. That's cool. I wish I could do that. I can't. I can do 3 hours sometimes, 4 hours, but with music, that's enough sometimes. And if it's focused. And Stephen King, the most prolific writer of all time, he writes 3,000 words a day. He gets his quota, and once he gets to 3,000 words, he's done by noon. The rest of the day, he reads, he goes for walks, he hangs out with his grandkids, lives life. And that's the other thing too, is you have to actually have a life because you can't just be glued to your computer. So I think the key is as early as you can, get right to it and just do your daily work. Don't trip out on it. Don't try to make masterpieces. Just do, this is today's work. And I found that when you try to make masterpieces every time, because I'm a perfectionist, I want my stuff to be good. I found the less you want it to be perfect, the more perfect it becomes. It's weird.
It's true. It's true. The more you try to control, the less control you get. It's this weird paradox of life, but it's absolutely true. So I want to, right now, I'm going to play a couple of your tunes. You might not hear this, Todd, but for everybody else, they're going to hear a couple of just samples of your tunes. I'll go ahead and mute you real quick. Bring up your music here on the screen. And I want afterwards to kind of pick your brain because, Todd, you've been at this for so long, and I want to find out what exactly you have found are some of these golden rules for structuring your production music to make sure that it is being useful and licensable for the clients that you've been supplying and working with. So this is the first one called 11th Hour. Let's take a listen to just a little snippet of this one. Obviously, you guys can tell there that he's got a lot of sports running through the blood there, a lot of great energy. Here's another one called Spraying Mud, which is, by the way, a great track title. Let's take a listen. And obviously, if you guys can't tell, Todd is obviously a very accomplished guitar player, so a lot of his tunes are going to have some guitar focus as well. Here's one, I like this one a lot, called Work Boot Stomping. Let's take a listen. Obviously, another really good, energetic, high tempo one. And then this one is really cool called Brooklyn. It's got a little bit more of that hip hop rock flavor. Let's take a listen. Really cool groove, really, really awesome track. What's fun about that one, what I love so much, Todd, is that it really does bring me back to my early days in this industry, which was much more in that hip hop rock sort of flare up there. So it's cool. You still got a little bit of that going on there. So you've been doing this, first of all, how many tracks do you think, not including all the alt mixes and stems, but total full tracks, how many would you estimate you've composed in your career at this point?
It's around 650 at this point.
650. Okay. So after 650 of these bad boys, are there some common rules, structured elements, sort of tips that you can give us in terms of making sure that when you hit bounce on it, it's not a perfect track, but it's licensable, it's marketable, and most importantly, it can get placed? What are some of these golden tips, golden rules you can maybe share with us today?
One I've noticed is energy. It's got to have there's not a lot of slow songs getting placed, I've noticed. And also the rule of thumb is like, I forget what the percentage is, but it's a high percentage of songs are happy. There's not a lot of dark, menacing, heavy stuff. There is, and there's a market for that. But I've just from watching TV, I was like, I'm going to pay attention to how many tracks in the background, how many of them are in a major key, which, I listen to metal. So I'm like, it's like, but I want these tracks to do good. So, and not all of those are in a major key, but at least they have energy. So that's the first thing. One thing is to hit them right off the bat because these music supervisors are scrolling through tracks looking for something. And so the same thing with any music, the first 5 seconds, you have to just don't have a long intro. Just have it an undeniable, I'm going to smack you in the face with an intro, but have the intro in intro. Don't just go right to the chorus yet. I usually, within a track, since you can't just have, usually when we're working on something, we come up with the initial part. And that's something that I found I can do really fast within a half hour. A lot of us can come up with, I guess they call the 8-bar loop, which is, I guess, the main part of the song. And within a half hour, cool, this actually sounds cool, except it's 8 measures. I can't repeat that over and over again. So we got to make this into a full track. That's where I used to get stuck. I think a lot of people get stuck is arrangement. And if there was a simple and fast way to arrange this 8-bar idea into a 2.5 minute track, that'd be amazing. So what I do is I know that there should be at least 3 distinct sections of a track. And so usually the part that I came up with most likely is going to be the chorus. So I call that the chorus. And then my rule of thumb is how often the chords change. So if it's a regular 4-chord progression where the chords change every measure, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. For the bridge, I'll make that H chord change every 2 measures. For the verse, I'll make it change every 2 beats. So that the rate in which the chords change is different for every section. And doing that will automatically differentiate parts. And then, of course, do different chords in the bridge, do different. And sometimes in the verse, I won't even do a chord progression. I'll just do a riff on the tonic. And the other thing to pay attention to, and this is in all music, and once somebody pointed this out, arranging became like, is pay attention to tension and release. If you don't have the element of tension and release, that's what makes a song interesting. And like some of the masters of that, it's like Rage Against the Machine. Listen to that first album. It's like you're winding up and then or EDM, and pretty much every
EDM song ever, right?
Yeah. And so you don't have to go full EDM, but if you can just kind of have an eye towards like before a chorus happens, if you're like, oh, this chorus isn't pop, that little 4-bar section for a chorus, do a build up, do a and then chorus, things like that. So I usually structure it like it's not always the case, but an intro, chorus, verse, chorus, bridge, breakdown, which is basically a broken down version of the verse, into maybe a double chorus. The other thing is ending. We obviously need that punch ending. I think, but don't just go, here's a chorus and there's a punch. Boo! Do something that is specific to the ending. And so like have them make the ending special and make that like a big and all right, and we're done. So that keeping an eye towards that. But once you have that initial 8-bar loop, you have all your elements there. And don't stray too far. And that's the other thing is don't create a different emotion for every section. Whatever emotion that is that you created in that first 8-bar loop, that's the emotion. Because when a music supervisor is looking for a track, like that spraying mud one, that's they're wanted. I can picture them doing that over like, shots of race cars going through muds. And so they want it fast and funny, energetic. And so I'm not gonna like in the verse do a halftime drum beat with like clean arpeggiated guitars. Let's keep the vibe of everything, but just make it different for each section. So it's not a loop.
That's great. And I've never heard that before. That's such a useful tip in terms of making the chords change at different rates for the different parts of the track. I've never consciously thought about it that way, but I think I will from now on, thanks to you.
Yeah,
I've
I
always
see
just
a
gone
lot
with,
of
yeah,
a lot of musicians, even like around where I sometimes write songs with people, and the biggest mistake is that here's a chord progression, and then in the verse, here's like an A, they go to a different chord, but the chords change at the same point. It's like Chinese. It's like I don't know. It just kind of gets at you. So you need to change it up a bit. Yeah.
absolutely. And I noticed one thing that you do really well with all the music that we were previewing and all the ones that I've heard of yours is texturing. You put some really interesting ear candy, whatever you want to call it, where, all right, first verse, pretty stripped down, maybe just be drums, bass, and guitar. We ramp up, like you say, we're going up the roller coaster, click, 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 more and more and more tension, big release for the chorus. And usually there's going to be a lead or some element there. Second verse, you usually texture, right? You have new percussion, you have a new guitar lead. So you're constantly building and building and building as the track is moving forward. And it's almost like the last chorus is usually the big crescendo, and it's adding new
Yes.
elements and new leads and new things you haven't heard on the first chorus. So I notice that you do that very well. Something I noticed as well pretty early on in my career that you've got a texture and you've got to build. There's no such thing as needing to
Yeah.
copy and paste that first verse again. We already got the first one. If they need it again, they can copy and paste too, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I always say like, when you're creating that first loop, the 8-bar loop, layer it as much as possible to where you can't possibly cram anything more into it. Make that the last course. And then when you copy paste it the first course, then delete some stuff. Make it like a stripped down. So with each time the chorus repeats, there's something new. If there's not something new happening, yeah, then they can just literally copy and paste it. And so if the first chorus is like this, the second chorus has I double that lead guitar with like a keyboard lead, or I add like a pad or a tambourine is usually a good thing. And then by the final chorus, you just I'll add some vocals. I don't know, something like that.
Something, exactly.
So
So my final
yeah.
question for you would be hitting writer's block or getting stuck somewhere in that
Mhm.
process. Let's say you come up with 8 bars and it's like, okay, it's cool. It's not my favorite thing. And you know you need to finish it, but you don't really feel like finishing it. Or at any point in your track, you just kind of hit this wall where you're like, I'm not feeling this. I don't really like it. Or maybe I'm just in a bad mood. What are some of the strategies you've done in your career to get yourself, because you obviously don't have the luxury of what amateurs do, which is like they can just stop. Like, all right, I'm not really doing this
Yeah.
for a living, so I can just go play video games. But if it's your job, I got to do this or else I'm going to be suffering consequences. So what do you do? Do you take a break? Do you ever abandon tracks? Do you just kind of refresh things? What's your approach for those situations?
Yeah, and that does happen a lot, where sometimes you'll be working on an idea and you have to, I think it is nice if you can be personally motivated. If there's something about it that you like. Sometimes we make the distinction of this is TV music. So let's just throw it out there. And unfortunately, a lot of times within the TV world, they want familiarity is good. They want if you're doing something too outside the box, it almost isn't going to land. But I love stuff that's outside the box. I'm all about innovation. I listen to prog rock, things like that. So that's what I love. But it's knowing that I have to make something that sounds normal. What can I do in this track that's going to please me? It kind of tickles me a little bit, and like maybe I don't know, like layering up guitars or just doing something to it that I'm gonna make this big fuzzy wall of sound Black Keys thing and just make it nasty sounding. Like on that Brooklyn track. Uh, That is good. But if you do hit a block, yeah, sometimes stepping away from it and working on something else is good. There's the incubation process with your brain where, and that's why I always sort of dislike the fact, especially in the TV world, that deadlines are so, we need this, can you get this by tomorrow? And because creativity takes time. And but unfortunately, sometimes we don't have it. But if you're working on a track and you're stuck, go have lunch and completely forget about it. And you ever notice when you step back to it, you press play, you're like, oh, the bridge is actually the verse is the bridge. Oh, okay, there it is. And you didn't see that before, but that answer was always there. And so the more you can kind of work, step away, work, step away. Sometimes I mean, I do have my sessions that I do in the morning, but I throughout the day, I'm going throughout my day, but I'll stop by and whatever track I'm working on, I'll listen to it for like 15 minutes. I'll do a little burst of 15-minute work things, and I'll do the obvious changes. Oh yeah, that snare sucks. Let's put this in here. Let's put a fill at the end there. And then okay, I don't hear anything. Cool. I'll go do something else. And then your subconscious incubates it. So if you've hit a wall, that means you're using your conscious mind too much. You have to let the subconscious make connections that you normally wouldn't have made. And to not do that would be to deny the track some genius, you know. But,
Wow, great. Yeah, great wisdom for sure. Yeah, stepping away, space, definitely you're right. It comes back and you realize, yeah, I was getting too pulled into the moment of it and couldn't hear the problems, or maybe I wasn't digging it and just taking a little break. And I'm like, no, what? There's actually some really cool stuff here. I just was tired of it. And so now I need, with some fresh ears,
yeah.
I can kind of breathe some new life. You're absolutely right. Yeah, letting that subconscious kind of come in and do the heavy lifting. Very, very wise, man. So you guys can see now why Todd is joining us in Pro Feedback, why he has done so well with sync licensing. And so you guys can absolutely get access to his brain, his wisdom, and his thoughts on your music if you like to do that. So I'll put a link below if you guys want to check out Pro Feedback and join us there on the platform. So thank you so much, Todd. I really appreciate your time today, man. And hopefully we can get you on the platform, and not on the platform, but on the channel more often, and get some more interviews with you. If you guys have questions for Todd, post it below this video, because I'm sure I could get Todd to come back on to maybe answer some questions if you guys had for his journey and his process and how he's really thrived and succeeded. He really did kind of follow the same journey that I did in terms of playing more of the quantity game, not getting so married to the things that we're doing, but basically just continuously putting our head down, getting in the trenches, pushing forward, going through disappointing royalty check after disappointing royalty check before one day it wasn't so disappointing, and it's like, oh, okay, it's actually working out. So he gets it, guys. He's definitely been in this business even longer than I have. So if you guys have questions for somebody like him, this is your chance. Make sure you do post below. So thank you so much, Todd. Appreciate it, man.
Yeah, thank you. Oh yeah.